In this video, we're actually here to tell you about a burp contest. Wait. Let's start over. So, basic role-playing is the rather boring name that Chaosium gave to the core system that powers their most popular games like Call of Cthulhu and RuneQuest. They're currently holding a contest for game creators, and the games have to be based on the latest iteration of this system as presented in the new Basic Role-Playing Universal Game Engine book. Now, this is pretty exciting if you've got some ideas for a game you might want to enter, but the contest rules may not quite be what you expect, and the prize may not either. This contest is not like the one that resulted in Eberron back in the 2000s. Some of you may recall, Eberron was an open call for a new setting for the 3rd edition of D&D, and the winner of that contest collaborated with WotC in the writing and the editing, and then WotC published and marketed that book. This is not quite that. The prize here is not Chaosium working with you to publish the work, but giving you a cash prize that you can use to put toward the publication of that work, but probably wouldn't cover all of it. They cover the amount as assistance.
Yeah, it would probably cover a few months' rent, but hey, something's better than nothing.
Unless you live in New York or San Francisco, and then it might cover like half of your month's rent.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So here's what the winners get. There is a short list of 10 winners who will receive $500 each. Again, I know $500 is a lot, but it's $500. From that short list, 3 winners are chosen. Those 3 winners each receive $2,000 plus the $500 for being on the short list for a total of $2,500. And then even one more winner is chosen by the People's Choice from the list of 10 shortlist winners. And that developer or that person receives an additional $500. So if you win all 3 of these things, or if you're in all 3 of these, your grand total could be up to $3,000. But it's probably more likely it's going to be $2,500, honestly.
Yeah, there's only going to be one People's Choice winner, and
Yes.
I believe that's an actual People's Choice. The company won't make that decision. It will be voted on by people.
Right.
We're choosing
Yes,
a People's
the
Choice.
People's Choice.
And on top of all this, you get a trophy. Not just a trophy. There's a trophy for each type of award. So you also might wind up with 3 trophies if you are the lucky People's Choice winner. But I want to reassure everyone who's worried about our culture, there are no participation trophies, so we don't need to be upset about that.
I love participation trophies.
That surprises me because you didn't like the burp joke.
No, I hated it.
So basically, they are giving you the opportunity to have a little limelight and a little bit of money, and they're just holding the contest itself.
You're going to want to know more about the requirements because a couple of them might actually be sticking points for you. But we'll go over those in a little bit. First, we want to talk a little bit about the BRP system itself, so you have an idea of what that is before you start making your game.
Yeah, and if you want to call it something in shorthand, we've already covered this, but burp is the correct pronunciation.
Yes, yeah, BRP.
You might recall the OGL debacle from last year. Many RPG publishers responded to it in one way or another, and Chaosium was part of it. And the new source book that we're talking about is an answer to that OGL debacle. They decided to take everything you could do with the BRP system, put it in one book, and really encourage people to publish not only their own settings, but kind of their own games based on this system. And as far as I understand, they do not require a cut from things published with this license. And the only requirement is that you must publish your game under the ORC license. This is the license that Paizo is spearheading, and a lot of other industry people are involved in. The ORC license is overseen by this committee, and the committee is committed to keeping this thing free. It's in the text of the license that nobody can come in like WotC wanted to do with their own OGL and just invalidate it.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah, the license stands and the license stands. That was the big intent of it. Let's talk about the system itself. It's skill-based, including combat, so you don't have a different to hit modifier. You have a firearms skill, say, or a brawl skill in close combat, and you roll that skill. Pretty much everything you want to do in the game, with very few exceptions, is rolling against a skill. It is a percentile-based roll, so if you are rolling against firearms and say you have a 20%, you need to roll 20% or lower on a percentile dice. So it is roll low. Some people don't like roll low. They don't think it's as exciting as roll high. I get that, but the percentage-based system could be seen as a little bit more intuitive, especially for new players. And the target number, you always know it. That's another unique thing about this particular system.
There's
Other systems do this too, but
no bonuses to add. It's always going to be with the number on your sheet, and you're good to go.
there are situational differences in the target number, but you know what they are. They're half of the percentage or double the percentage.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And you already have them on your character sheet.
Right.
So yeah, no math, no head math.
Yeah.
There are modifiers, but no head math.
Yeah.
The system is also classless. So instead of gaining a level in a class, you advance individual skills and you have an opportunity to do that when you use them. So it's a little bit more realistic in that sense. What your character's spending a lot of time doing is naturally what they get better at.
So this system does have things to put in. It's called the power system. You can accommodate magic, superpowers, psionics, and mutations into your characters without having classes that are specifically giving you those things.
Let's say you're using the power system for magic spells. It's a little bit different, and I've heard a little simpler than in D&D or Pathfinder. I don't know the particulars of the power system very well for this system myself, but apparently it's not restricted by levels or spell slots, so it's a little bit easier for new players to get their heads around.
So the level of crunch in the game is very customizable. Optional spot rules offer different features to make the game kind of how you want it, without being too rules light or too rules heavy.
And the rules really accommodate everything from a pretty light type of game like Call of Cthulhu, where there isn't really a big focus on combat, all the way to RuneQuest, which is more of a traditional high fantasy role-playing game. And here's the interesting thing about this particular version of this system. This book is really targeted at tinkerers, and they've openly said so. It's for people who want to create whole games out of it, not just settings or little house systems. There's a reason that the book itself talks about the ORC licenses. They're hoping that indie developers and publishers will do something with this and will put more games for sale out into the market. They're encouraging that. That's why the contest is here. Now, there have been plenty of other universal systems before, like GURPS and Palladium and several other systems. But unlike those systems, basic role-playing is more of a Lego kit. It's got little modules you can piece together however you want. So it's a little bit more flexible. It's not as prescriptive as something like GURPS, which is pretty verbose. And if you're going to run, say, a GURPS Western, you buy the GURPS Core and the GURPS Western source book. If you're going to run GURPS Steampunk, you buy the GURPS source book and the GURPS Steampunk book. If you're going to run a Steampunk Western, then you need both of those books from GURPS. And yeah, they're splat books, but they're big enough that, you know, they're entire settings in themselves and they give you a ton of information. And that's great if you want to do that. But if you really want to roll your own thing from the ground up and you don't want to feel confined by all that detail, this is kind of to me, a better system for that.
So now let's talk about the requirements, the real thing that you really watch this video for. And thanks for sticking around to watch all the way to this point.
Don't give away the secrets. This was all interesting content up to now.
My bad. So the ones you might expect to be in a contest like this are things like giving a pitch that's a max 100 words to Chaosium, a one-liner comparison to an existing game.
Also, how the game integrates with the BRP, which systems and rules you're using from BRP. You must guarantee that no AI was involved in any way in the content, which I thought that was interesting that was in there. It's a sign of where we're at.
Yep.
You will retain all rights to content. Also interesting.
Yep, that's a different one than I expected. I didn't expect that on there. But the whole point of this is to push indie gamers and or indie game creators.
Yes, because they're not publishing it for you. Again, they're giving you money that you can put toward publishing and launching a game. And of course, you can't use intellectual property that you don't have permission for.
Right.
So you cannot make the alternative Star Wars role-playing game and, you know, take on Fantasy Flight or whoever has that now. I think it's still Fantasy Flight.
Right.
Now, here are the rules, though, that might be a little bit of a surprise to you. They certainly were for me, and I'll be honest, they're a little intimidating. So you have to include a PDF of a draft of the game, and we're assuming that means a fuller draft, so not like an outline or an abstract in some typical proposals. But they also say in their Q&A section that it doesn't have to be a complete manuscript, so that feels a little fuzzy to me. I think, you know, the gist I get is you need to have most of the game there, but it just doesn't need to feel in a final form, and there might be more content when you publish it. But I think you want to have enough of it there that they could read it and really get a sense for the game beyond just describing what it is or describing a proposal. Whatever your central mechanic is going to be, or whatever way that you're using the BRP mechanics in your own unique way, you should probably spell that out. That's the impression I have.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think there is a Q&A session or a Q&A section on the page that talks about a few of these things and clarifies them, which is where we found that it doesn't have to be a complete manuscript,
right?
But still, it's leaving it fuzzy and not.
Right.
It's open for interpretation. How much you need to have fleshed out for that? That draft.
I felt like in that Q&A section, they did a good job of putting it in a polite way, but a lot of it is like, you figure it out.
Yeah. Then the rest are really giving you a bunch of homework to do without really letting you know how to do these things or giving you resources to do these as an individual that's new to this.
Right.
So one of the requirements is to do a full competitor market analysis and target audience and give that to them. Which, if you don't know how to do, is going to be intimidating right from the start.
I've never done one.
Right. I've done a little bit. If you've made up business plans, this is a normal thing that you have to do in business plans.
Haven't done that either.
But it's intimidating to try and figure out if you have no real experience.
Sure. And what are you going to say about target audience? Roleplay gamers.
Well,
who's that?
Yeah. I mean, you have
targeting
to,
women? Are you targeting young people, old people? Are you targeting, I don't know.
Or are you targeting people that really want a new horror themed around squids? I don't know.
That's Call of Cthulhu.
Oh,
they make that game.
That is.
Similarly, they also want a production and development budget proposal. And it must be a spreadsheet, they specified. So no, I don't know what else you would use. No fancy reporting tools, just a spreadsheet, I guess.
Yeah, and again, this is, I think, a pretty standard business plan sort of thing.
Sure.
They're basically asking you to really do your homework and make sure, I think, that you're very serious about developing this game. Because one thing they do say is that they really want to help make sure all of their winners are developed eventually, whether it's through Kickstarter or something else. They want these published.
Sure. Yeah, they're really offering you a little bit of cash and some notoriety and attention in the form of the contest itself, because they're Chaosium, so people are going to know about it if you won. But what I find interesting is in the Q&A section, and be sure you check that out if you go and look at the entry form, which we'll link to in the description. The Q&A section is invaluable in clarifying a lot of this, or as valuable as it is, I guess. Right. Sometimes it doesn't tell you much. Interestingly, they aren't going to enforce what you do with the money they give you. You don't even have to spend it on the game. Really, that is not an obligation of you by entering the contest, even though they want to see your business plan and the budget, how you're going to spend money on a budget. But then you don't actually have to do that. So I guess, like you said, they're really just trying to see if you're serious about it.
Yeah.
If you kind of know what you're doing. And I understand that. I will say, though, I feel like that discourages a lot of smaller creators. Like, this is what they're really saying without coming right out and saying it is, hey, someone who's had a little experience in indie publishing, here's some help. And it's technically an open contest. You don't have to have a resume where you've done that before, but you're certainly going to have an edge if you know how to do these things like a market analysis or budget. For example, I could budget for, I can go out right now and see how much it costs for line editing and content editing. Cover art, yeah, I can go out and get a feel for how much that's going to cost me. Printing costs? No idea. I could probably figure that out, but I don't think there are a lot of small run printers that are super accessible. I don't know how any of that works.
Yeah.
Or if I say, I get around that by saying it's not going to be printed. It's just on Drive-Thru RPG. And is that okay? Am I serious enough? Not sure.
Right.
But worst of all, what if I want to get into game stores? I have no clue how to get something to a distributor and get them interested in distributing it.
Right.
No clue. I don't know if they expect to see that. I guess probably not. But I don't know. And the Q&A doesn't make it super clear.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if production and development budget, you're definitely going to have to figure out how much it's going to cost to print these books.
Right.
But I don't think you're necessarily going to have to figure out so far into like distributor.
No?
I don't think that's something they're asking with the production and development budget.
So maybe I could get around it by saying it'll be PDF only.
Maybe.
Because I don't need a budget for that.
Well, you do.
I don't. I can send it to Drive-Thru RPG, and they just take a cut of sales.
Fair. All right. Well, that's part of your budget, though.
And they do print on demand.
That is part of your budget, though. If you are sending your product to somebody else and they're taking your sales, that is part of your budgeting process.
But it's not a production or development budget, right? That's a business
That would
budget.
be production.
Would it?
Yeah, because you're sending it to somebody else to produce. So they are.
That's no cost to me, though. That's all income.
It is, because you're losing margins.
This sounds like tax stuff now.
It's margins.
Okay, it's margins. Fair enough.
That is.
See, this just shows you how much I don't know. Even though I'm a little worried about these hurdles because I'm not a businessy person and I've never put together a proposal to send something to a print run before, and still may not do that for this contest. I may just use the cop-out that I'll use Drive-Thru-RPG. Even so, I think I'm going to enter the contest. I think it's exciting, and I think if you're thinking about it, you should too. There's no entry fee, so all it costs you is a little bit of work, and if you're like me, you haven't done a lot of this before, you'll learn something, and that alone is going to be valuable.
Right, for sure. And, I mean, again, there's no entry fee, so what's the worst case that's going to happen?
A link to the page for the contest, which can also lead you from there to the entry form, is in the description below. And if you enter, good luck. And maybe we'll see each other in the short list.